when I'm in the room with women, I say, what's worrying you the worst? And weight gain is the highest, and along with hair loss, which is so interesting. And the other thing, Zoe, is that we know that the more weight you gain, the worse your hot flushes and the lower your response to hot flush medication, whether it's HRT or anything else.
Ah, interesting.
So getting into a healthy weight range is one of the most important things that you can do into midlife, or preserving your healthy weight range, and it is going to get harder.
Welcome to Thriving in Menopause, brought to you by Prevention Magazine. I'm Zoe Meunier, the editor of Prevention. Now, this week we're thrilled to be joined by GP, author and women's health advocate Dr Ginni Mansberg, who has just released her new book, The Longevity Handbook For Women, which cuts through all the noise and misinformation out there to tell you what really matters when it comes to living a long and healthy life. Today, we'll be exploring the links between menopause and longevity, from cardiovascular and brain health to muscle metabolism, bone density and inflammation, and importantly, the practical steps women can take now to support healthier aging. Dr. Ginni, thank you so much for joining us today.
Zoe, thank you so much for having me.
How exciting, the book's out.
I know. It is literally like having a baby, only a longer gestation.
Yes, hopefully not quite as painful. Yeah. Now, we know longevity isn't just about living longer, but living well for longer. So why do you think menopause is such a pivotal window when it comes to women's long-term health?
What a great question. We know that there are estrogen receptors on pretty much every cell in your body.
Yeah.
And if the receptors are there, that means that estrogen does something to those cells. And that means that there's going to be a big difference between it being there, i.e. before menopause, and not being there, so towards the end of peri and then after menopause. And we know in most cases it actually does really good stuff to different cells. And ask any woman who's been through menopause what her brain feels like, what her sleep does, but even things that she can't see, like how her muscles function or her bones, things that you can't see, the way her heart is functioning, her kidneys. It's quite a powerful shift. And when you think about it, our body, we're living in the 21st century with a body that was really designed thousands of years ago when not many women lived past menopause. And so to a certain extent, we're kind of defying gravity by continuing to live. If we don't replace the estrogen, which a lot of women choose not to do, then it's a big change in our bodies. Not always for the worse. Some women suffer more than others, but it is worth thinking about it from a biological perspective.
Yeah.
It's fascinating.
Yes, there is definitely a before body and after body for sure. So for many women, menopause feels like a pretty sudden turning point physically and emotionally. I mean, for some it's quite a long, drawn out turning point. But what's actually happening in the body during this transition that can influence aging and longevity, apart from obviously the what you've just said about the estrogen receptors?
So that's actually a more complicated question than you can imagine, because
where do you start?
Because we don't know so much, because there's been so little research into this. I feel like the whole world has suddenly just gone, oh, yes, menopause, it's a thing. Every woman's going to go through it. Let's start doing some research on it. But I think when you and I spoke, when I released the M Word, How to Thrive in Menopause, that book that came out in 2019, I called it the M Word because literally no one was talking about it. You were brave enough to go, hey, let's have a chat about it. But until that point, like literally when Michelle Obama talked about having a hot flush on Air Force One, it made front page news when she was 53. Like, hello, of course she'd gone through menopause, but like everyone was like, ooh, she admitted it. These days, I feel like every woman and her sisters is putting their hands up going, I am menopausal and so is my friend, But so in terms of what happens to the body, it is really around the loss of estrogen, but it's also about aging as well. So, menopause on the whole happens to women in Australia average age of 51, which means that because menopause is defined as 12 months since you've had a period, that means that the average woman has her last ever period somewhere around her 50th birthday, somewhere within that year. And so, of course, it's happening to people who are getting older, and we're putting on a lot of weight. There's a lot of debate out there about whether the weight gain is hormonal, whether it's just an aging thing. I'm on the hormone side, but, it is quite controversial. But if you are putting on weight and just your cells are going through the generalized aging changes as well, there are a lot of things that happen in addition to you losing estrogen, which has profound effects on muscles and bones and brain health and heart health as well. And so a lot of women that I see feel exhausted. And you know what the number one symptom I hear in my surgery is? I find this fascinating. I don't feel like me. I just don't feel like me anymore. That is more common than hot flushes and weight gain and hair loss and itchy skin and dry vagina and all the other things put together. It's just I don't feel like me anymore. So women sometimes can't put a finger on how they feel different. They just know they feel different.
Yeah. I mean, with all those things, it's all consuming, isn't it? Yeah. You wouldn't be able to put your finger on it because there are just so many things going on. Yeah. Now, we hear a lot about menopause symptoms, but not nearly enough about heart health. Why does cardiovascular risk rise so much after menopause?
A lot of it has to do with the impact of estrogen on the arteries, and at a molecular level, like in terms of what is the pathophysiology of what's going on here? We don't know. There's a lot that we guess, but we know that's big data sets of women who go into menopause early. So by early, I mean before the age of 45.
Right.
So if you have your final period at 43 and a half and you go officially into menopause before you hit 45, that means your menopause is early, and it's considered, we used to call it premature, but now it's called primary ovarian insufficiency if your ovaries fail before the age of 40. And that's 4% of women in Australia, so it's not that unheard of. That subset of women have an accelerated risk of a few things. They have an accelerated risk of heart disease and higher risk of developing atherosclerosis, or those chunky plaques, which is just basically globs of cholesterol in your arteries that then get hardened by calcium that thinks it's trying to heal the glob of cholesterol, but it's not, and then it gets inflammation on top of it, so you get clots forming on top of it. They also have a higher risk of some cancers. That's interesting, particularly bowel cancer. So we know that estrogen is somehow protective in terms of bowel cancer. We don't really know what the mechanism is there. And they have higher risk of osteoporosis with fracture. So we know what it does to the bone. In terms of that accelerated atherosclerosis, just to come back to heart disease, when you start to get a narrowing of an artery because of those plaques that then become hardened, as you can imagine, even the smallest blood clot that travels through your artery can all of a sudden block it if it's a narrowed artery. So you have a much higher risk of both heart attacks and strokes, but also things like heart failure is really driven by an early menopause. So what does that mean for women who go through menopause at 51, average age in Australia? We know that up to the age of 51, heart disease in women is rare. Like when estrogen is around, it is rare. We know that there's a catch-up period where women start to catch up to men. And because heart disease looks different in women, possibly because instead of it being a gradual onset, it all comes piling in after menopause, the symptoms are different. The prognosis is different. What we look at with cholesterol should be different. It's not, because we still rely on men's values, but because we don't have enough research in women. But we know that if you or I have a heart attack in our 60s, our prognosis is worse than for men. And that's partly driven by the fact that our symptoms are so different that women can turn up to an emergency department and get told, nah, nothing wrong here, see you later. Instead of, a man will have that elephant sitting on his chest, in the middle of his chest, kind of feeling that's a classic heart attack. Everybody jumps all over him and puts an ECG on and diagnoses that women are more likely to be sent home. Because she might just have some nausea or some lightheadedness or some pain in her jaw or some pain in her arm. Though that's problematic, or back pain is another one for women. But there seems to be a little bit more than that. So we seem to have higher rates of inflammation. Our immune systems go bananas, much more than men's. And so some of the inflammation that is driven by our immune systems going a bit haywire can also drive increased damage.
And as you say, some of these things for women, they are quite insidious. It's really hard to sort of pinpoint. But what are, if someone's going through midlife, sort of apart from the menopause symptoms, what are some symptoms that women should look out for that sort of tell them that they really should be taking action?
So I think that women have been told for years that our pain is irrelevant, that we're putting it on, that we're being hypochondriacs, or we're just, it's stress is one of my favourite things. Or my other favourite is you just need to lose some weight is the panacea for everything. And so women have culturally almost learnt not to advocate for themselves. But honestly, Zoe, you have a symptom that you have not had before, okay, we'll give you 24 hours for that symptom, unless it's like, you know, an unbearable headache that is like you're thinking, wow, I think I'm about to die. Like, obviously, you know, straight to the emergency department with any of those sort of major symptoms. But if you're thinking, my guts don't feel right, you don't need to gaslight yourself.
Yeah.
Go and get checked out with absolutely everything, because midlife is the time, unfortunately, where chronic diseases start. And what we know is that there's a condition in medicine that we call multimorbidity. Multimorbidity means the existence of two or more chronic diseases at the same time. So, for example, a really common combination is high blood pressure and diabetes, or it could be osteoarthritis and asthma. Any two chronic conditions at the same time increase your risk of mortality at any given age, so dying at an earlier age, and they tend to become like a domino effect, and you tend to get more and more and more chronic diseases, which is why we want to avoid the first one. And when you get diagnosed with one, right, we're taking everything really, really, really seriously now. So it's not like there's a, you know, symptom A, B, and C is like the sign.
Yeah.
Any change, if you are worried, I'm worried. Come on in and talk. The worst thing that happens is you've wasted half an hour of your time.
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, as you know, we've talked about, there's so much noise out there. There's people coming at us saying, you should do this, you should do that. Do you think midlife women tend to focus on one thing more than they should?
I think what has really taken over and consumed our media, and particularly our social media algorithms, is the whole wellness, longevity, biohacking kind of system. And what I mean by that is by biohacking, I mean that you're going to now monitor your health with a series of health tech and wearables. You're going to put on your Oura Ring. You're going to put on your Apple Watch. You're going to have it reporting, dinging the blood sugar monitors on somebody's left arm. You know those little white discs. That's a blood sugar monitor that goes and actually tracks blood sugar in your skin. There are a whole lot of wearable devices, and then not only that, there are blood tests that you can get done by labs. I'm going to tell you that if you have to pay a fortune for a blood test, that means that blood lab is a private lab and is probably not accessing or able to access Medicare. And if a lab has been accredited by the National Accreditation Association, so it's a NATA accredited lab, you won't need to pay. So it's probably an unaccredited lab. I'm not saying that these labs or the data that you get from any of your wearables is not reliable. It's probably good. But I just apply my skeptic's eye to a lab that's not accredited, because nobody's telling you whether the machines are measuring everything right. That's what the accredited labs have to do. They have to prove that when they tell you your sodium is 128, that it is actually 128.
Right.
So that's the first thing. And then after you've got all your diagnosis, that is probably uploaded into some sort of tracking app.
Yeah.
And then from your tracking app, you're now going to take some hacks that have been gatekept by the doctors who want you to be dead and dying like me. And you're going to get the secret, which is going to be sold to you for a mere $200 per peptide per month, or, you know, a raft of supplements, or even lifestyle measures like intermittent fasting, or cold plunges, or alternating saunas and cold plunges, things for which the evidence is pretty pathetic. And that I find, my concern is, I have patients who are obsessed with these things. And so now what's happening is, instead of going out for a walk in the sunshine, Zoe and I are recording this in Sydney, which has just been horrible, like wet, cold, miserable, and we have a sunny day today. And I wish everybody that I knew would just get up and walk outside in the sunshine and not just look at their phone, put it away. What can you hear? Can you see a dog? Can you see a friendly face? Smile at everybody and see what happens. Those things are so good for your well-being. And having your head in an app that's telling you your biological age, for which there is no evidence. Those calculations are not based on any evidence that has been reproducible in large-scale trials.
Right.
I think it takes you away from where you want to be, which is having a really happy and healthy and vibrant second half of your life. And so my concern with the whole biohacking thing is not just the exploitation of women, and particularly in the menopause space. We are a vulnerable group, particularly because we're told to shut up and sit down and not complain too much. We're a vulnerable
and we're desperately
group.
trying to get relief from what we're going through.
Because we're trying to be there for our kids and our parents. And we don't, and work and mummaging, 20 people in the office. We don't have time to actually not feel well. So I really get the people who are drawn into the biohacking things. But I'm hoping what this book, the Women's Longevity Handbook, does is a friend to you. It's kind of like your AI chatbot on your shoulder that gives you evidence-based answers. Because unfortunately, Claude and ChatGPT are going to draw from all the biohackers and all the evidence-based stuff and mash it up all together so that, in my experience, it gives you a bit of an okay answer. But it's not. It doesn't help you to sift the facts from the fiction. And what I'm hoping it does is that for women who feel that, and there are some brilliant GPs out there, but not everybody has a brilliant GP. So if your GP either doesn't have the time or it's too expensive to go and ask them every single question that you have, because that's like $80 a pop every time you walk through the door, and you don't want to be doing that every month. I'm hoping that this book is your companion where you just go, okay,
they said that.
Yeah, let me just look that one up.
Yeah, exactly.
And you can go to the back, look at the index and go, okay, now let me read what the science actually says, and do I need to be worried about this?
Yeah. There's a lot of fear about dementia and cognitive decline and again, how that changes after menopause. What does the evidence actually say about menopause and long-term brain health?
So we know that 80% of women report brain fog around menopause transition, which is like your perimenopause.
Yes.
And if we put you through a raft of scans, your brain... It looks no different whether you're a woman with brain fog or a woman without. Right. And we also know that the worse your depression, the worse your insomnia, and the worse your hot flushes, the worse your brain fog.
Yes.
But if you're, let's say, going through perimenopause at 48 and all of this is happening to you at 48, the chances of it being dementia or even an early warning sign of dementia is close to zero. We really don't see, even though the changes are starting of dementia, and there are certain tests that we are now getting more available that are actually showing us that those changes are starting 20, 30 years before you go into full-blown dementia. And you are starting to lose a few blood cells, but so are men. So what we know is that's very rare. The dementia is very rare to show up before the age of 65, and it's generally, if it's coming before the age of 65, it's a well-known genetic problem. And there are genetic tests for that. So, but how does estrogen impact on your long-term risk of dementia? So I'm going to try and put together the data sets that we have because we don't have a full and comprehensive view of this. So what we know is that early onset of menopause, so before the age of 45, is a big risk factor for dementia.
Right.
And that kind of makes sense because what's bad for the heart is bad for the brain, and what's bad for the blood vessels of the heart is bad for the blood vessels of the brain, and there's a very big correlation with dementia there.
Yeah.
So what about for women in their 50s who go through menopause at an average-ish time who don't have one of those genetic things? We don't know what to tell them about the hormonal impacts on their risk of dementia.
Right. Yeah.
There was a very large Danish trial which showed an increased risk of dementia for women who use hormone therapy. However, there are a few caveats there. The women who were going into dementia at this stage went into menopause 30 years ago at peak hysteria over HRT. So those women had, for them to get the HRT, they had to be in the worst possible way. And we know that very heavy burden of hot flushes, for example, correlates highly with a higher risk of both dementia, stroke and heart attack. We don't know why, but the worse your hot flushes, the worse that risk. So possibly the only women who got the HRT who are now going into dementia are the women who are the worst of the worst, who are already at increased risk. So that's issue number one. Do we know that the HRT is a causation, or did it somehow even mitigate the risk a little bit for this group of women who, would have had a five-fold risk of dementia and now only had a double risk of dementia? We don't know.
Yeah.
The second thing is that the form of HRT that it was used, certainly at Denmark at that time, was a form of progesterone called norethisterone, which is still available as a part of HRT in Australia in some combination patches. So if you have estrogen and progesterone in a single patch, it's generally norethisterone that's used.
Okay.
And that is one of the progesterones that is more likely to actually be associated with both the higher risk of heart disease and breast cancer. So we don't tend to use it that much in Australia anymore because we have what looks to be a safer form of body-identical progesterone, which is the micronized progesterone. We have that here now, and so very few women are put onto that form. By the way, anyone who's listening to this who's on that combination HRT patch, for the average woman, we really don't know that it increases your risk. So please don't panic, but if you want to go talk about it with your GP, feel free.
So a lot of sort of question marks, I guess, still out there, and so there's nothing that sort of says that, okay, we know that women, typically go through menopause in their early 50s, and then we know that dementia takes, 10 years to
more, 20, 25,
and
30.
then that's when women are having increasing cases of dementia over men. So but no one's still been able to really kind of say, well, that's because the estrogen has stopped at this point, kind of thing.
So I'm going to now transition from the known knowns and the studies that have been, in large population data, and I'm going to put my overlay on what I think is going on. We know that other risk factors for dementia, strong, midlife depression, midlife insomnia, big risk factors for women. And we know that something that can definitely help you, and as I said, that's those severe hot flushes.
Yes.
So we know that something that can help you get rid of your hot flushes, help you sleep better, and help your mood is the HRT. And certainly the early data, because we've only had these forms of HRT where lots of women are actually going on it for a short amount of time.
Yes.
So women kind of our age, so I'm 58, I would say that the women who are my age who've been on it for sort of maybe 10 years, well, I only wrote the M word in 2019. Very few women wanted HRT back in 2019.
Even that,
A lot has changed since then. But it's going to take us a while to get data from our cohort because we're not going to start hitting peak dementia age for at least another 10 years, probably another 20 years.
Yeah.
And then we're going to have the good data. But the early data where we're looking at blood markers that we know could be a sign that dementia is more likely to come.
Yep.
Things like blood pressure, cholesterol markers, things like that. It is looking good for the prevention of heart disease and dementia. I think that it is going to look really good in the future because of just the way it impacts your well-being and reducing those things that are so highly correlated with heart disease and dementia and strokes.
Yep.
There are a couple of caveats. So one thing that we learnt from the big trial in 2002 that tipped menopause on its head, that showed apparently an increased risk of breast cancer for women who took HRT. It's not that study has been debunked. It was actually an excellent study. It was the conclusion that was drawn and the inference that was made that it was for every single woman who went on HRT as opposed to the women who were starting it in their 70s. But it was actually a really good study and 160,000 women, like I'm telling you.
Huge.
Beautiful study. It cost $1 billion
wow.
of taxpayer money in the United States. So a really, really big study. But what we did learn was something really interesting because it was a study of older women who had never taken HRT when they'd gone through menopause but started it in their mainly average age 63, but 1 in 4 was over 70. What we learned is that going into menopause and then going on HRT 10 years later, estrogen went from like a protector of your arteries and stopping you from developing those accelerated plaques to actually a promoter of it. It actually made the whole situation worse, or certainly the form of HRT that was used in that group of women, which we very rarely use anymore. It was not even your norethisterone. It was a very different form of both estrogen and progesterone. So it gave us what we now call the timing hypothesis. And what that means is that if you've been more than 10 years since you went into menopause, if we put you on estrogen again and you have atherosclerosis in your arteries because that's happened in the intervening period, it's very possible that estrogen is going to accelerate that, which is why if you have gone on to HRT, it's if you went into menopause 10 years ago and you now go to your doctor and go, listen, I've changed my mind. 10 years ago I didn't want the HRT, but now I do. There's a whole new chat that we need to have about your cardiovascular risk. So I think that's really handy to know, and nothing's a no. Everything is a discussion between you and your doctor, and they might give you their advice if you ask for it, but otherwise they're just going to give you the pros and cons and the options of everything. That's what shared decision making is these days. And I have many, many women who have elected to take the HRT regardless because they've been putting up with miserable hot flushes for so long. By the way, if you took HRT and stopped 6 years ago, you're considered to be less than 10 years from having estrogen in your system. You know, because 6 years ago, so let's say you went into menopause 15 years ago, have been on and off HRT, but the last time you took it was 6 years ago. Yeah. The HRT, the estrogen is still considered to be in your system from 6 years ago. So that's not the same as not having taken anything for 10 years.
Okay, that's good to know as well. Gosh, yeah. It's just still evolving so much, isn't it? The whole research and everything. Now, we've brushed on this before, but so many women feel like their body just suddenly stops responding the way it used to in midlife. What changes during menopause when it comes to metabolism and weight regulation?
So this is really controversial because lots of studies have found that weight gain, which is typically around about a kilogram a year during perimenopause for a total of about 10 kilos of altogether weight gain, but a lot of my patients gain much more than that. And that's very common around menopause. But it looks like it's not just the menopause.
Right.
Certainly you do have estrogen receptors on your muscles, and it's harder to maintain your skeletal muscle mass after you pass through menopause. And your skeletal muscles actually drive your metabolism. So there's definitely something in there.
Yeah.
But the women that I see also, if they have a really rough time in menopause, if their mental health has just fallen off a cliff, if their self-confidence has taken a battering, if they now have aches and pains everywhere so that getting up and going for a run is just like your worst nightmare. If you're hot, so now just going to the gym, all you can think about is the fact that you're going to sweat. If you're
insomnia.
Insomnia. So you just don't want to wake up for that gym workout and you start craving junk food, because so many of us do when things are tough. And it's just a tough period anyway, because especially if you've got teenage kids and sick parents and you're mummaging at work and all the rest of it, it's not enough to put it all down onto hormones. But at the same time, hormones are a big driver of all of that. So I think it's a very complicated picture.
Yeah.
But I did an audit of my patients by symptom frequency because I ask the same questions. We've got a menopause questionnaire that we ask for everybody, so it's very easy to collect data. And but when I'm in the room with women, I say, what's worrying you the worst? And weight gain is the highest, and along with hair loss, which is so interesting. And the other thing, Zoe, is that we know that the more weight you gain, the worse your hot flushes and the lower your response to hot flush medication, whether it's HRT or anything else.
Ah, interesting.
So getting into a healthy weight range is one of the most important things that you can do into midlife, or preserving your healthy weight range, and it is going to get harder. And where you store your weight is going to be very different. It's going to go now around your middle instead of on your bottom and thighs. And so with all of that in mind, you are ripe for exploitation.
Yes, yeah.
Because the weight gain contributes to the low self-esteem that is already taking you by storm. It's peak time for sexual problems between couples. If you're having the meno rage and you're going off at people and then having conflict at work or within your family, within your friendship circles, and so now you're just feeling terrible about yourself, putting on a whole heap of weight and feeling unattractive does not help that situation. But I want this for you. I want every woman to be in her healthy weight range, not because I give a shit what you look about in a bikini. I think you're beautiful. It's not that. I don't care what you look like at your kid's wedding. I think you're gorgeous. It's about your health and your well-being, and this being in a healthy weight range is such a critical part of a really good longevity story. And I can't sugarcoat it. And you can't manifest it for anyone. I can want this for you all that I want. I can help you with the advice. But only one person is going to say no to the drive-through Maccas. Only one person is going to say no to that late night, bag of lollies that's calling your name from the kitchen cupboard where you bought it earlier and shoved it there. Hint, don't do that. And only one person is going to say, I'm going to lift those weights and I'm going to eat that protein and I'm going to believe that I'm worth it and I'm going to have the self-compassion to understand that investing in my well-being right now is the best thing that I can do for my children, for my children's children, for my partner, for your marriage, for your work.
Yeah. Yes. Look, as someone that does struggle with my weight, I mean,
I do too, sister. It's hard.
Yeah. We know that the spare tyre that we're sporting is unhealthy because of visceral fat. So is a spare tyre, does that always mean that you have visceral fat?
Yes. So there will be some of that will be subcutaneous. So if you can take your belly and wobble it, that is all subcutaneous fat. And it doesn't seem to do anything that bad to you. Like if you have mountains and mountains of it to the point where your body mass index goes up to 30, it is very unlikely that you're going to get to a body mass index of 30 and not have perivisceral fat. And what we've discovered recently, and I find it fascinating, is that the perivisceral fat acts like an organ and it secretes what we now know is over 400 so far adipokines, so fat-generated chemicals, have now been identified and nearly all of them are pro-inflammatory.
Yeah.
And that's why women who are overweight and obese have a 40% higher risk of hand arthritis. The wear and tear arthritis that we always said was just too much wear and tear. And we always said to people, lose weight if you have osteoarthritis so that there's less pressure on your knees and less pressure on your ankles, which is all true. There is a part of it that is mechanical shearing, but actually your visceral fat, your perivisceral fat is putting out heaps of inflammatory chemicals into your body that can then be countered by your myokines, which are the chemicals released by your skeletal muscle that are anti-inflammatory and that directly speak to and enhance the operations of parts of your brain, your immune system, your heart function, your gut function, so that having bigger muscles and particularly more than visceral fat is a very good aim. That is very hard to do. I wanted to share something with you that frustrates the shit out of most of my patients. But I just want to be really transparent.
Yes.
When I started in general practice, I think well over 30 years ago, I used to say, so tell me about your diet. And I'd have a woman with a body mass index of like 38 saying to me, well, I do all the right things. I have, I sometimes skip breakfast, but, often I'll have oats with Greek yogurt and some berries. And then at lunchtime, I have a tuna salad. And at dinner, I might have some steamed chicken and broccoli. And I'll be thinking, wow, that is a really good diet. So I stopped asking that. Yeah. Because I found out that studies tell us that that is a notoriously inaccurate way to take a diet history from somebody. So I've changed what I ask. And now I say, can you walk me through the last 24 hours of your eating? So tell me what you've had so far today. And I'm not kidding you, 99.99 repeater women, a percentage of women will say to me, oh, listen, this is a very unusual day. Don't ask me about today. See, I was in, I had to come and see you. So I went to the shopping centre. So I had a muffin and a mocha. And I didn't have breakfast this morning, but I had a pikelet in the car on the way. And then last night we had pizza, but we never, ever, ever had pizza. We had pizza last night because my daughter had ballet and, I just didn't have time. That is what I hear on a daily basis. Yeah. And even that is notoriously inaccurate because we underestimate how much crap we've eaten. And so even those of us who think that our diet is beyond reproach, I promise you there is kilometres and kilometres of room for improvement because what we are doing in our heads is so much better than what's happening on the ground. And that's why journaling your food is so powerful, is because you have to actually write it down. If you're just going to sort of walk past the cupboard and have a couple of pieces of licorice, you've actually got to write it down. Yeah. And so I don't have any easy answers, and I am going to tell you that this is really hard. My top tips are, and this is coming from, Zoe, you've known me for a long time. I have always battled with my weight. And I've had a body mass index of close to 30 for a lot of my life. And what I found really helped me to get into the healthy weight range that I am now at 58 is I had I did do meal prepping. So I do work from home on a Monday. I am lucky enough to do that. I get a supermarket delivery, lands on my door at 6 a.m. on a Monday.
Yep.
My kitchen looks like God knows what has gone off in it by 8 o'clock on a Monday morning, but I have meal prepped my week and it looks pretty amazing. And then if I get hungry, instead of just going, I can't think of anything, I can go past my fridge and there are little containers of enough, cut up vegetables and some little containers of roasted chickpeas and all the sorts of things that you would eat if they were there, only they're not there because you haven't had time. Meal prepping is just a godsend. But the other thing that I did was I went to ChatGPT and I uploaded my diet that I thought, even as a doctor who works in midlife, was pretty good. And I found out that I was under eating protein, way under eating fibre, even though I had a salad for lunch and vegetables with every single dinner. I was undercooked on my fibre and had to up that. And I was also undercooked on my calcium. And both of my parents had osteoporosis.
Wow.
So this is really, you need 1,300 milligrams of calcium a day for postmenopausal women. That is not easy to get. And so I went to ChatGPT and I put in all of my issues that no one else wants to talk to me about and that no one else is interested in, but Chatters just loves it, gives me all the compliments. Oh, this is really hard for you. I love him. So I went to Chatters. I know, and I put all of my issues, can't cook on a Tuesday, can't cook on a Wednesday, get home really late, whatever. I need really easy to cook dinners. It's just me and my husband. On Monday we have the whole family over. I need to cook for 8. The whole thing went into ChatGPT and it designed like a month's worth of dinner, complete with all of the recipes that I needed to do this.
Wow.
And how to food prep and what to order. It generated a shopping list for me. I am I'm going to sound like I'm being paid by ChatGPT. I pay ChatGPT. It does not pay me. But the reason I'm saying is we nowadays have tools that can help you get around the best and the worst of your lifestyle. My other tip, besides food prepping and going to ChatGPT, is do not have the crap that calls your name in the house. It should not enter your house ever. So if someone comes to my house and brings chocolates, let's say for a dinner party or something like that, I will open them, I'll put them on the table, and then I'll send them home with them.
Yeah.
And I'll just go, you know me, I'm always battling my weight. You got to take this with you. And the other thing that I've had to do is give up drinking alcohol. I will only do that on the weekends now, and I try and limit myself to 1 to 2 drinks. That is so hard for me on a personal level. I don't understand people who are sober curious, or people who don't like coffee. I can't relate. I hard relate to people who say just life is better with alcohol. I agree, but I can't. It just sits on my ass, and I can't afford to. So I've just had to make that rule, and I've had to conscript my husband, who looks like a string bean and can't put on weight. Poor guy. I've had to co-opt him into going the low kilojoule lifestyle with me, as like my support person. Yeah.
Very good advice there. I've taken mental notes. So okay, there's a lot I can take from that, absolutely. Sadly. Okay, so ultimately, what do you hope that women take away from the Longevity Handbook for Women?
I hope, Zoe, that people don't read it like a novel.
Yeah.
It's a resource. You look up bits and pieces. I hope that they enjoy it and have a laugh. It is not meant to be that serious.
It is funny in parts.
I like to take the piss out of myself and everybody else as well. So I hope it's entertaining, but I hope it can be that source of truth when you are feeling that you're overwhelmed, you don't know where to turn, that TikTok and Instagram are targeting you with umpteen, in a row reels of bullshit, that this will be a place that you can turn to with actual evidence-based information. And most importantly, what I want for every woman is to feel like me again and to have an even better second half of her life than her first half. And I can tell you, since I share in the book that I sold my car. I don't have a car. And so not like walking everywhere has been really powerful. Taking exercise, I don't love it, but I found some exercises that I don't hate. And taking my sleep and my salad eating and calcium eating to the next level. I actually do feel more energetic than I was feeling, certainly in COVID. And I feel like really optimistic about the next decade. And as a grandma now and somebody who I want my kids to say, here she is.
Yeah.
I'll be back in 4 days. I want that.
Yeah.
And I think it was somewhere I wasn't headed maybe 5-6 years ago. And I hope that other women don't feel that that's unattainable for them, that they're just on this one-way ticket to getting old now. It does not need to be like that.
No, it's not. It's not a decline. We can take it wherever we want.
You can get even better, healthier.
Yeah. I mean, look at you. You're glowing. You're a picture of health. So.
Yay.
Look, unfortunately, that's all we have time for today, but please join me in thanking Dr Ginni Mansberg for her always insightful advice on women's health. Be sure to pick up a copy of her book. There's so much wisdom in there, and I really did get so much out of it. If you liked this episode, we'd love you to rate, review, and subscribe. And of course, for more great information on living your best life at midlife, be sure to pick up a copy of Prevention Magazine. I'm Zoe Meunier. See you next time.